We're up to continuing with the and the Rebbe discussed earlier about the different levels of Avodas Hashem that are hinted in the Pasuk Hashemayim Kisi V'Ha'aretz Adem Ragloi. So you have Hashemayim Kisi V'Ha'aretz Adem Ragloi representing Torah and mitzvahs. Shemayim is Torah, Kisi is Aretz is the level of mitzvahs, and then you have the level of Bais, which is the level of Bechol Ma'itcha, the level of Makifim, and then we have the level a El Abid, which is the level of working, bringing down Atzmus. And the Rebbe says basically the level El Ze Oni, El Zabit, El Oni Nechei Ruach is the level of Bittel, the level of Oni. That's when it's based, everything is based on Emunah. The Rebbe brought down there is two levels why there could be an Oni, why you need Emunah. You either need Emunah because you don't have the level of you don't have the level of understanding. You don't have a level that you can base it on your intellect. So you have emunah. You're pashut on oni. You don't have. You're poor because you don't have uh, any inner reasons why you're doing the mitzvahs, but you're doing it with emunah. That's the level of emunah. Emunah and bittul. That's before even you start the mitzvahs. And then the higher level in Amunah is, and Bittel, is that comes after the level of understanding, after the level of Naran and the Chayi Yechida, after the level where you're involved, you come to even a higher level, to the level of Amunah. And the Rebbe says, but in the level, in the beginning, already in Anius, when you already have in that Amunah, in that Bittel, you already have the upper segel, as the Rebbe says, which is connected to the lower segel, the dot in the middle. When the dot is on the bottom, which is the lower level of Anius, in the level when it's not yet reached the higher level, that's connected to the upper dot the way it's after. So the level of bittul, level of aniyas, brings down the level of atzmus. So the Rebbe continues now to explain that in the pasuk, as we see, that comes aniyas is only mentioned after the avodah ze abit el oni, because begilui abit, it comes out at the end, even though it's in the beginning before even Hashemayim Kisi V'Ha'aretz Adem Ragloi. Let's look inside. So based on this, it turns out the oni unechei ruach, that the avoida of an oni, poor and low ruach, which is basically amuna. That means it's based on amuna. Tzricha liyes gam lifnei ha'avoida d'hashamayim kisi v'ha'aretz adem ragloi Torah mitzvos. Needs to be even before the avoida of shamayim kisi v'ha'aretz adem ragloi, which is the level of Torah mitzvos. Umekol shikein, and for sure, lifnei ha'avoida de'eza bayis asher tivnuli, before the avodah of Eza Bayis Shetivnuli, we talked about the level of Bayis is the level of B'chol Moedecha. That's B'chol Moedcha. B'chol Levav Chol B'chol Nafshecha. That's the level of Shemayim Kisi V'Ha'aretz Adem Ragloi Torah Mitzvos. And then you have the Eza Bayis, which is the level of B'chol Moedecha. So the level of Emunah needs to be before anything, before Torah mitzvahs, but certainly before Chol Vavcha Chol Nafshecha, but certainly before the level of Bais. Why? Sharei Emuna ubitul heim hayisoid shel kol ha'inyonim. Because Emuna and Bittul are the foundation, the basis of everything. Elo shabitchilo, but in the beginning, ha'aniyus shaloi hi kipshuta. Before you do Torah mitzvahs, then you takepor, or before you have the understanding, before you have the avodah b'chol avavcha b'chol nafshecha, then you're takepor because you don't have yet that level. Even the basics, you're an oni bedas, you don't really know. Ani yishtei kipshuta. D'zeh shetzorich le'emuna belakus. Why do we say this kipshuta? Because why does he need a muna? He needs a muna because he doesn't have the other avodah. He doesn't have even that many items are forced out logically. In other words, logic dictates them, many in yonim, but he doesn't do it because of the logic, because he doesn't know the logic. Is because he is poor in knowledge, so he has no knowledge of that. So that's why he does it mitzad seichel, mitzad amuna, even though there could be reasoning for them. So that's before the avodah. But after his work with the inner koiches, hashamayim kisi, והארץ הדום רגלי, that's the inner koiches, the Shemaim kisi והארץ הדום רגלי, with his koiches pnimim. And then also the koiches hamakifim with the chayi yechida, first with the nefesh ruach and neshama, and then with koiches hamakifim, the level of bayis, the chayi yechida. So what is then is also a level of ani. Ani is shalohi. So why is he poor then? But he already knows, he learned, he's already worked with the koiches pnimim and koiches makifim. Why is he an ani then? Ani is shalohi al derech maimer azal pesi yam l'chol davar. Then he's poor because similar, our sages call Moshe Rabbeinu, they say pesi, the pasuk says pesi means a fool, yamin l'chol davar, he believes everything. Who's this fool that we're talking about? Our sages tell us that's the Moshe Rabbeinu. You imagine Moshe Rabbeinu is called a fool, and he believes everything. Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the ultimate intellect and knowledge in Torah, uses Amunah, Yamin l'chol davar. He's like a fool, which means his approach to Torah is not from an intellectual perspective, like, oh, I understand it, but he serves the Eibishter as if it's all Amuna. He's like a Pesi, he believes everything. Even though that Moshe was a master of understanding, Balasoga Gedoyla, Betachlis Hashlemus, he had a great grasp in the ultimate wholesomeness. He was the total completeness, the fullness. He understood. And yet, yet all matters of godliness was like a pes, he was like a fool. He didn't go by the seichel, but he went in a way of emunah. Moshe Rabbeinu did, and he believed, not because he understood, but just believed. Because the truth is, we're talking about the Eibishter, we're talking about the Lakus. About godliness, nobody can really fully understand. We all have to use essentially Amunah to really connect. Ki mikivon shel legabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Delays machshava tfisa beklal, since relative to Hashem, which no thought can grasp at all. So the biggest chochem and the greatest understander still cannot grasp the Eibishter, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hakol kipsoim etzli yizbarach. We're all like fools next to the Eibishter. Even though in your mind you're able to grasp, but next to Hashem there's garnished. Therefore, all matters need to be in a way of emunah. So, so how do we explain? So we have the level of oni that comes before he knows and learns, and then we have after learning he's still on oni because he has the level of emunah and bittul, because that's the way, like Moshe Rabbeinu really did all matters of godliness. So bechlolus who? So in generally speaking, how do we divide these two levels? The ani is shebetchilas ha'avodah ibitul ha'dekabbalah soil shalamata betam bedas. That the bittul, the pornus that is in the beginning of the avodah, that's a bittul of kabbalah soil, which is below reason and understanding. That's the level. That's the level of before. That's Kabbalah Soil. You accept. That's below Tam Vadas. In other words, you don't have Tam Vadas. It's just a level of accepting. That's Kabbalah Soil. The aniyas that follows, that comes afterwards, the level of onim l'chei ruach that comes after Hashemayim kisi v'aretz v'ha'ez abayis is a bittul b'metzias shalamayla metabadas. That's a bittul entirely from existence, which is higher than tabadas. Before the davening is bittul hayesh lamato metabadas, and after is bittul b'metzias l'mayla metabadas. So the question really is, so the Rebbe explains now that we have the level of bittul and kabbalah soil even before the davening. So how come the pasuk says el zeh oni, that el zeh abid el oni l'chei ruach? How come it says in the end after Hashemayim kisi? Why doesn't the pasuk start el zeh abid el oni l'chei ruach? Since we're saying that this oni also means the literal oni, who has no das yet, so why doesn't it start before saying Hashemayim Kisi, before we start with the avodah of the koiches pnimi and the naran? So the Rebbe says we can say the fact that the pasuk says why does it say after Hashemayim Kisi? Even though also the emunah that is below das is also hiba atzmos. So we are essentially getting el zeh abid eloni l'chei ruach even before we get to Hashemayim Kisi in the beginning. Okay, it's also understood from that we know that in the very beginning, the Shem Shomayim Shogur B'fi Koil. We say that the name of Hashem is common in everybody's mouth. In other words, everybody, you say the Eibishter, you say above, you say the name of Hashem all the time, even before you know and before you understand, everybody knows the Eibishter. He knows Shem Shamayim, the name of Hashem. Everybody knows. And the reason is because the Moir, the luminary, meaning Hashem himself, is revealed, that everybody knows the name of Hashem. So that means that even when you don't have yet the level of knowledge, you're still, and you're a koil, you're just like anybody, you still know about the Eibishter. You know the Moedis Bizgalus, so you're believing in Atzmos. So why don't we have the onion ruach start off the first thing before we talk about. That's the yesod of everything. That's before even we have the level of naran of Hashemayim Kisor and רגלי. So the reason the Rebbe explains ki habota, because here we're talking about looking, gazing. It's not just that there is the level of atzmus, but to gaze is more than just to know shev shemayim shagur. It's a bittul that comes down in a level that you can appreciate, you can gaze on that. Uki habota vel zeh abit. When say habota is abit, hu gilui. That's revealed who kamay dava sheroi beinov. It's like something you see with your eyes. The gilui ha'atzmus and the revelation of atzmus ubehamuna shalomaylam hadas is in the emuna which is higher than das. Gilui of atzmus. Even though the Rebbe just said that the mo'ir is bihis galus, it's revealed. Revealed meaning that it exists in this context. But when can you gaze? When is it bigilui? That's only in the Muna Shel Mayla Matabada. So the Pasuk can't start with El Zeh Abit El Oni Nechei Ruach, because at that point there's no Abit, there's no Gilui. So therefore, that's reserved for later on. After you have a Shemayim Kisi, Ba'aretz Adem רגלי, Eiza Bayis, then we come to El Zeh Abit, to the Gilui of Atzmus in the Nemuna Shel Mayla Matabadas. So now we talked about the three madregas, basically. You have Oni, Amuna, Bittel before you start the Avodah. Then you have the Avodah both with Pnimius and Makifim. And then you have the level of Bittel Amuna, the way it comes after the Avodah. So the Rebbe is going to say this is also the three periods in our parsha. We talk about the three periods of when you plant a tree. The Rebbe is going to explain first in Poshet, in the Posik, according to the Kabbalah, what is the idea of planting in the ground, which is the planting is Zoh, the way it comes down in Malchus, and there's three levels over there. Where what level of Zoh comes to Malchus? The first 3 years it comes from Netzach Chod Yesod Malchus. The fourth year you also get the level of Tiferes, a part of Tiferes, and the fifth year you get the higher level. The Rebbe will explain further also in Avodas Hashem how we employ the midas of Ave V'yira, as the Rebbe will continue to explain. Hey, V'yashloimar, we can say Shegim ul inyonim ela. This three matters. What we're talking about here previously is three aspects. Aniyas shebet chilas ha'avodah. We talked about the poor that is in the beginning of the service, which we don't have in the pasuk, but there is. That's the basis, the yesod for everything is that level of emunah, that level of bittul that you start off with. Then you have a Kabbalah soil, as the Rebbe touched it. Then you have a ha'avodah da shamayim kisi. The Tzukim, Shemayim, Ba'aretz, and Bayis, Goimer, this all included in the Avodah with the Pnimius and with the Makif, with the Bayis. And then V'aniyas Shala Achrei Ha'avodah da Hashemayim Kisi. And then you have the level of Aniyas, of Bittul, Amuna, that comes after the Avodah Shemayim Kisi, that the Pasuk says, so the Rebbe says we can tie this thing. This is similar to the three, the way we divided which is in the fruit of the tree, the three periods when you plant a tree, which is in the Parsha. Well, this is the Parshas Kedoshim. This is discussed in the Parshas Kedoshim about when you come to the land and you plant a tree. So what happens in the three periods of the tree? You have number one, you have Gimel Shnei Orla. The first 3 years are 3 years of Orla, which means that you're not allowed to use the fruit, you're not allowed to benefit from the fruit. That's the first 3 years. Then you have the second category is Shona Revi'is. That's the 4th year. And the 4th year is Kodesh Ilulim, you bring the fruit to Yerushalayim. And then you have Vishona Chamishi, is the 5th year, that because of keeping all these mitzvahs, Lahoisif Lochem Tvos, the Pasuk says, there will be additional Tavua following that. So you have the 3 years, the 4th year, and the 5th year. These 3 avodas of Aniyas, the beginning of the avodah, then the avodah, and the Aniyas afterwards can be lined up, fit in with the 3 levels of the 3 years of Orlah, and then the 4th year, and then the 5th year. Boinyanu. So what's the idea? The Rebbe explains it now. The Eretz, Malchus. Eretz, that land, that is the level of Malchus. The Elon and the tree Huzo. So it's Midas, the Zeir Ampin, the Midas, which is the Chagas Nehi, and Malchus. Unetias Elon Ba'aretz, to plant the tree in the land, means planting Zo in Malchus. That's the pasuk says, when you come to the land and you plant kolei tzmachel, that's planting zo in Malchus. Uhamshocha zo b'Malchus. That's extending zo to Malchus. The b'hamshocha zu yeshnon gimel dargis. In this drawing down, there is 3 levels. The megimel shonim horishonis mekabelis hamalchus. The first 3 years, when Zo goes to Malchus, the first 3 years, it only gets the last 3 spheres of Zo. Netzachod Yisoid, the last 3 spheres of Zo. Netzachod Yisoid. The main aspect of these midas is shal yodam bo ha'ashpo b'poil. It's through them. They take the midas. Within the midas, you have the chesed, kavura, tiferes. Those are the etzem midas. That's a chod yisoid. Bring those midas into actuality. So therefore, since the only thing you get is netzach chod yisoid, lachein, gam hamidas nehi heim dugmas hamalchus. So also this netzach chod yisoid are similar to the Malchus because they are for the poil. Malchus' whole idea is that it gives to Hashpah to Biyah. And this comes from the poil. They allow for the yesh. And there could be a nurturing for the outers from there because they allow and they provide for an entity outside. So when you only get from Netzach Chod Yisoid, you don't have only godliness, but there's a room for yesh already. So the Rebbe says, so now this also ties in with another interpretation of the first 3 years. Right now we're saying the 3 years Kedusha. This is Atzilus. It's the level of Netzach Chod Yisoid. That's the number 3. But there's also another interpretation that the number 3 corresponds to the Gimel Klippas Hatmeis. Gimel Klippas, that's what an extreme. That's the 3 evil klippas. That's why the fruit is also bahanoah, because it comes from the shalosh klippas atmeis. How does this connect to the idea that you're planting a Zoh in Malchus, which is all Kedusha? But the point is because Zoh receives only from the last three, and it allows for klippas. That means that's the connection. So therefore, you can't eat it because there could be a unika. So he says like this: the zehu hakesher shel hapirush hanal. This is the connection of the above interpretation. Shegimul shonim harishones heim keneged gimel hamidus nehi. That the first 3 years correspond to the 3 midas of nehi, like we're saying now. Netzach Yisoid. Imapirush, with the other interpretation, shegimul shonim harishones and keneged gimel klipsat meis, with the interpretation that the first 3 years correspond to the 3 klipsat meis. How do we connect them? When Malchus receives only from Netzach Hod Yisoid, that allows for a nurturing for the Gimel Klipsat Meis. The Gimel Shonim Elu Orlo Basurim Brano. That's why the fruit of these 3 years are Orlo Osur Brano, because they allow for the Gimel Klipsat Meis. Vashon Horevis. What happens on the 4th year? Over there, this is the second period. The first period is from Zoh, from Netzach Hod Yisoid of Zoh. And the 4th year, Mekabelas Hamalchus Revi'is Mitiferes. It gets from the level of Tiferes, which is one step up from Nehi, which Tiferes includes Chesed and Gvura. So it says, Mishlish HaTachton Shaboy, or Mishnei Shlishim Shaboy. Either from the lowest, the 3rd lowest level of Tiferes, because Tiferes is divided also into 3 parts, either just the 3rd or the 2/3 of Tiferes. That comes in the 4th year. V'lochein hapedes the shona hareviis. That's why the fruit of the 4th year, hem kodesh hilulim laHashem. They're kodesh, praising to Hashem. The Hilul will be Tiferes, because Hilul is in Tiferes. K'moshe Kosuv, Umhalilin l'shem Tifartecha. That praising, to praise is Tiferes. Tiferes is beauty, so therefore, Kodesh Hilulim is Tiferes. Umhalilin l'shem Tifartecha. They praise. So Tiferes is associated with Hilul. On the 5th year, then Malchus receives also from the upper 3rd, which didn't come. On the 4th year, he gets from the upper 3rd of Tiferes. That's why on the 5th year adds Tfu'osoi, which is the 3rd upper level of Tiferes. This is all the Aishas of Kabbalah. The Daled HaBechines, these 4 levels of Tiferes, Netzach Hod Yisoid, Shebishon Revi'is, the 4 levels of Tiferes, Netzach Hod Yisoid is 4th, Shayochim the Daled Eishis Havaya, that have a connection to the 4 levels of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei is 4. Bashon HaChamishis, and on the 5th year, Nimshach Toisves Oin. On the 5th year, you add additional light. The koitze shel yud, that is from the point of the yud, that is the level of keser. So that's according to the Kabbalah that I've explained what happens in the first, said in the 5 years. The 3 years is Malchus receives Netzach Hod Yisoid, and therefore, because it's mainly the externality of the midos, it allows for klippas. That's why it's connected also to the first 3 years being Kimel Klipsat Meis. We have to be very careful. It's Osur Bahanoah, because it's only the externality, and from the midos, only Netzach Hod Yisoid. The 4th year you get of the 3rd or 2/3 of the level of Tiferes. On the 5th year you get from the upper level of of Tiferes, which is hinted also in the 4 letters of the Shem Havaya is 4, and on the 5th year you have the h'tשלו, also the Koitze. Now next, the Rebbe is going to explain how all this translates in the level of Avodas Hashem. What does it mean to get from Netzach Hoid Yisoid in Malchus in Avodah, and what does it mean Shana Revi'is, Shana Chamishis, and Bez Hashem will continue tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay.